Pier Francesco introduced the topic very well, and he talked mostly about prosociality, empathy, reciprocity, because he's a nice guy. I am not, so I am going to talk mostly about competition and why dominance hierarchies are formed in animals and why they are maintained. So first I'll give a very quick introduction. Pier Francesco introduced that, so that's good for me. And then I'll try to work on an explanation from the animal perspective on the three different parts or arguments made by Lavoisier. And I'll finish with a very quick and probably too superficial or general comparison between human and non-human animals. So as this point has been made earlier, but when we focus on animal research or animal behavior or animal cognition, the approach or the framework, the theoretical framework is evolutionary biology and the theory of natural selection, which of course has developed through the course of the years from Darwin's first proposition. But the key argument here is that any behavior, for example, whether I scream when I see a predator or not, is based on how frequently you observe this behavior or how common this behavior here is. So how many individuals display this behavior depend on the cost and benefits of each behavior, in particular, in my example, screaming when I see a predator. So these affects how likely is a behavior to spread in a population, so to become more common or be reduced, as in the example up here. No? So if predators are selectively picking green beetles, so then you will observe a decrease over the course of generations in green beetles and an increase in orange beetles or red beetles. And we measure these costs and benefits in terms of how likely individuals are to survive and to reproduce, mostly using the inclusive fitness measure, which is a combination of how many infants you produce, but also how many infants are produced by your relatives. There are, of course, variations on this because you can make the argument that it's not simply how many infants are produced, but how many infants reach sexual maturity. But I don't think we need to go into that level of detail. But what is very important about this approach, and I think why it's so powerful, is because it focuses on cost and benefit analysis. The species you are focusing on, it becomes only partially important. What I mean is that you can use this approach to virtually any biological system. This could be countries, it could be single individuals, animal species, humans, and then you can talk to many different, to experts to many different disciplines, because you have this overarching framework on cost and benefit analysis and on behaviors and cognitive processes and social processes that only take place when they are beneficial for the individual or the group. That is why, for example, evolutionary biology is very strongly connected to behavioral economics or to game theory, mathematical approaches on what individuals should or should not do under certain conditions. As I said, Pier Francesco has already covered that, so I can move very quickly on these, but there are a couple of points that I would like to make about this continuous and ongoing debate between those who think that animals or biological approaches always focus on violence and on instincts, and those who believe that, in particular here, Margaret Mead on warfare, that culture explains everything. Douglas Fry, of course, here is paraphrasing what Tennyson wrote about nature, read in tooth and blood. This is connected, I think, to a Freudian approach about human nature, that instincts are about violence, about sex. He was obsessed with sex, in my view. But I think it's a very simple and wrong approach, because culture and biology are intertwined phenomena. we now have, and it's more than 20 years now, we have the extended evolutionary synthesis or gene culture coevolution, whatever you want to call it. Cultural evolution are many different terms. They show that there is a connection between cultural forces and biological or genetic forces, okay? So this dichotomous approach to human nature, in my view, is not particularly useful. I'm focusing, of course, here on violence. The simple and most evident degree of disagreement is Steven Pinker, Better Angels of Our Nature, who makes the argument that violence has decreased, which is probably true, but not in a linear way as Steven Pinker argued. And recently, last year, this book came out saying, no, the whole record by Steven Pinker is flawed, and actually it's completely different from what he's trying to say. So I think we need to move forward. We don't need to still be stuck on nature-nurture debate, because these two types of explanations work together, not in separation. And I don't think it's particularly meaningful to try to assign behaviors as whether they are genetically or culturally driven. It's probably a combination of both for the majority of times. And I'll give you an example of this on what we mean when we say there is a phylogenetic or evolutionary basis on behavior. In this particular case, on different types of violence. So this is a study that we are completing with my colleagues in Lincoln and Zurich on primate species, including humans. So this is 103 species of primates, all living in stable groups. So we only focus on primate species that are living in stable social units. And we focus on 5 different types of aggression. Infanticide, so adults killing infants. In-group and out-group aggression, meaning mild forms of aggression directly from group members to other group members, or from group members directly to individuals belonging to different social units. And the same for adulticide, the killing of adult individuals by adult individuals. So we find this different degree of the importance of phylogeny on violence. What this means is that when you take all the differences of violence, for example, out-group adulticide, 48% of these seems to be explained by how adulticide emerge or not in the phylogenetic tree. This is an estimate, of course, so it doesn't mean that this is a fixed measure. 48% of all out-group adulticide is genetically or evolutionarily determined. The second very important thing is that when we say that out-group adulticide or any other behavior is affected by evolution, it doesn't mean that there is no free will, okay? It means that under specific social and ecological conditions, we are genetically predisposed to act, in this particular case, violently. But we still have an option to act differently, pro-socially or in other ways, or to avoid confrontation altogether. Another important thing is that Christophe talked about it, about the fact that chimpanzees are violent, which is true, but what we find is that there is a larger number of species that display killing. In particular, out-group adulticide was displayed by around 30 species. So a substantial amount of primate species are capable of killing other adults. And I would like to give you a very quick, I added this at the very last minute. It's a little bit uncomfortable. So if you prefer look away, it shows some macaques killing another macaque in Sulawesi. These are, what happened?
Trigger warning.
He didn't want me to show this. Okay. So this is a video taken by one of my PhD students, and it's at different stages. So this is an individual that is being from another group that has been surrounded by members of our study group here, and they attack these individuals. This is like an abridged video of from more than 1 hour. The animal is basically unconscious and pretty much dead. They are targeting soft parts, as you can see.
How common is it in cresting macaques?
This is a yes, a macaque niger. Yes.
Now, how common?
How common? I'll show you in a second. Relatively common. So I added this because these are females. These are not males. So Christophe talked about rhesus monkeys, rhesus macaques being a species in which males are dominant, males are aggressive, and females are not. This is a species related to rhesus macaques, but the killing is mostly performed by females. And to answer your question, we have a decent number of deaths per year. This number is within the confidence intervals for killing in chimpanzees. So this species is quite nasty, especially to members of other groups. I can talk later if you want about why this violence is happening. I think now I need to move more specifically on Lavoisier arguments. And first of all, I'll try to explain from an animal research point of view what freedom we have, what are the reasons why we come together, and why when we come together, we are somehow stuck into this type of social grouping. And we have relatively limited freedom about what we can actually do. So there are a number of reasons for why, from an evolutionary point of view, we tend to join groups. Mostly is for defense from predators or infanticidal males or food. These were traditionally the three main benefits or reasons for why society evolved. But there are, of course, additional explanations. So Francesco talked about it. Social bonding is very important. You probably know that sociality and the network of social friends that humans have is one of the best predictors of survival in modern technologically advanced society. So social bonding is extremely important. You have division of labor, of course, social learning and comparisons that allow for division of activities and for learning new techniques. And of course, you can find more efficiently either mating partners or food. The problem, however, is that some of these benefits are also potential costs. Clearly, when you are in a group, you have more chances to protect yourself against predators, so you better protect food sources from other opposing groups, but you also face internal competition for food. So you are stuck in a situation where you have benefits by being with other individuals, but you have also potential costs. And again, the ending message or the take-home message is that if the benefits outweigh the potential costs, then it's better to stay in the group. What can be possible cost of leaving groups? First of all, emigration. If an individual moves to another group, for example, to avoid competition within the group, then they are at risk. We know that in animals, dispersal is very dangerous. Humans, I think, I'm not an historian, but I think it's the same. In ancient Greek, when members moved away from their city to build new colonies, they were facing potential risks. If you end up in enemy territory, you are in danger. Of course, also encounter predators, if you look at that from an evolutionary point of view. So there are several constraints on whether individuals, where and when and how individuals can leave their social unit to move to another group. And this is the first constraint on the possible freedom that individuals could have in doing whatever they want. It may sometimes be better to just stay in the group, even if you face competition, than facing the uncertainty of going somewhere else, in another group where potentially you may have even fiercer competition. The other important element is about sociological conditions affecting when we fight, okay? And classic sociological theory, of course, that have been development, but let's start from the basics, argue that it's worth fighting, it's worth being aggressive, first of all, when you are fighting over valuable resources. Again, resources that are enhancing your fitness. Mating partners or food or shelter, water are all very valuable resources. Sometimes social partners are very valuable resources. Another element that is required for fighting is when resources are not large enough to accommodate all the individuals. So if a group can all monopolize a food source, that's okay. Everybody can take their share, there's no need for fighting. But sometimes a food patch or any other resource cannot be shared, mating partners, for example. So under this condition, you face potential risk of fighting. Alternative resources may be absent or too far away, so you need to move too far away. That's dangerous. There are predators around. You don't want to move too much farther away from your group companions, or other food sources are low quality, then you may be prepared for fighting. And finally, and very importantly, the fighting ability of the individuals has potentially to differ, okay? And that's the biggest problem. Humans is a very big problem because we know that we are overestimating our fighting ability. Men in particular are known for always thinking, I can win this, even if we can't. But that's a problem because when you have a situation in which two opponents are equally confident that they can win, of course, I'm anthropomorphizing here, but let's say have an equal motivation to fight, then you end up in very intense and potentially very dangerous fighting. So again, you have some level of freedom in your social choices because an individual can always say, okay, I'll better rely on low quality resources other than fighting, but you also have the potential constraint that these options are not always available. So it's a decision about fighting or not fighting that depends on a combination of these different conditions, but also what other individuals do. And that complicates even further the situation. Your strategy and how effective your strategy is, whether you fight or you not fight, doesn't simply depend on the distribution of food sources, but also what other individuals are doing. If the others are fighting, perhaps it's not good for you to fight. If the others are not fighting, perhaps it's good for you to fight because you are more likely to win. This is a sort of frequency-dependent selection. How effective your strategy is depends on how common your strategy is in the group. Finally, I'll talk a little bit about this later on. Availability of social partners is very important, particularly for individuals who are not strong enough to fight on their own. Then having support very often from kin is extremely useful. All this fighting may lead to a situation in which there are established dominance hierarchies. As Pier Francesco mentioned, these dominance hierarchies are not stuck, so are potentially changing over time, but are relatively stable, especially in some species. So they usually emerge when group members are different fighting ability, and we usually measure that through dyadic interactions, which simply means interactions between two individuals, okay? So if the two of us are fighting, we tend to measure how often Sandro wins, always, of course, against me, and how often I try to win. If it's very biased, it's very skewed, Sandro always wins, I am subordinate, and Sandro is dominant. If it varies depending on context or time, then it's a little bit more unpredictable. So before I move further, this is very important for Lavoisier arguments, I believe, because individuals cannot afford to be in a constant state of fighting and of competition, okay? So even when fighting is rewarding, we cannot be stuck in a constant battle because that's energetically demanding. If I'm constantly fighting with other group members, I end up in a situation where I don't have time for bonding, for sex, for finding food, and that's too costly. So I may end up in a situation where I am forced to accept that there are some individuals more powerful than me and just try to get the best out of what I have available. Some are more powerful. There's nothing I can really do about it unless I form coalitions. So I'll talk about that in a moment. And we tend to differentiate two different types of hierarchies. These are very extremes, but there is a lot of variation across these two extremes. We talk about stiff hierarchies when there is very high competition for food or for any other resource. There is high level of competition. It pays to fight in order to become dominant. And in stiff dominance hierarchies conditions, usually the outcome of a conflict, so whether one individual wins or loses, depends on which individual is higher ranking. So if you take a group of individuals, you put them together, they will start fighting, and eventually some individuals will come out as the better fighter. This individual will be the most dominant individual. And once this status has been recognized by the other group members, no fighting is almost needed because the dominant individual can move around and the subordinates will accept their power, okay? It doesn't pay off to fight if the dominant is likely to win. That's the problem. And then you have shallow hierarchies where you have a little bit more freedom to decide what to do. You can avoid fighting, you can fight, or you can cooperate depending on the conditions. There is a little bit more room for deciding what strategy to do. Usually these are hierarchies that emerge in conditions in which there isn't a lot of competition, so it doesn't really matter if I win or I am more powerful. If we have 200 cakes here, each of us get a cake, there's no point in fighting, unless I want chocolate cake that you have, and I have something different. In shallow hierarchies, what we observe, or a way to measure how shallow hierarchy is by the degree of conflicts that are not resolved. So in this condition here, you have a confrontation between a dominant and a subordinate individual. The dominant will win either through force or because the subordinate will display behaviors that are indicative of submission. Here, there may be more, it's more open-handed. You may fight and you may have to fight in order to say, I am winning this one, okay? So almost paradoxically, you may observe more intense fighting in this condition than in this condition, simply because here the power is somehow recognized and there's no need to fight. Here it isn't. Yeah. If I'm not explaining myself clearly, let me know, of course. You? Right. So what do we gain by being dominant or by being a ruler in human societies? There is extensive evidence, although it's mixed, that dominant individuals have several different benefits. As I said, it's mixed because you need to remember that individuals have different strategies. Males and females have different strategies, as it has been mentioned earlier, but also dominant and subordinate have different strategies. And subordinate strategies sometimes can be as effective as strategies by dominant individuals. It's incredibly complicated. But overall, there is good amount of evidence that dominance tend to gain some benefits over over subordinates. You may wonder if you want to draw the link directly with modern human societies, you can say that wealth is a measure and power is a measure of dominance in human societies. And you may wonder, correctly, in my view, why more powerful individuals don't always have more offspring than subordinate individuals, which is actually quite common, contrary to this picture in modern technologically advanced society. One explanation that has been suggested is that we tend to fight for power. We don't tend to fight for reproductive success, or power is a sort of proxy. We try to gain power because, evolutionary speaking, power gives better access to resources and more reproductive opportunities, okay? So this may explain why the picture doesn't perfectly match with what happens in human societies. And it would explain why, for example, you have 86-year-old politicians who are still trying to be active in politics. Any reference to Silvio Berlusconi is not random, okay? So we have this idea that we need to be in power because it doesn't matter what happens, we have to gain power. All right. Karen Van Schaik has done an extensive amount of work on different types of hierarchies, depending on several different factors. Again, we can talk about it, but just as a descriptive approach to hierarchies, here are two of the most common ways in which dominance hierarchies can be organized: individualistic hierarchies and nepotistic hierarchies. So you need to imagine that each circle is an individual, and the most dominant individual is at the top, and then progressively you go down. And probably not incredibly clear, but individuals, circles with the same pattern are relatives, and larger circles are older individuals than smaller circles. In individualistic societies, there is basically no connection between kin network and the dominance rank. So one individual can be dominant here and the other one can be down here. I am generalizing here, so I may be wrong by definition, but these are the type of society that you don't often observe in animals, or at least in primates, but individualistic societies are very common in modern societies. Western or US, for example, is a very individualistic society. Nepotistic societies are societies where kin are close together in rank. So the mother here has the dominant position, and then her three daughters, and I'm talking about females because the model was developed for female primates. So the female here is protecting her daughters, and through this protection, the three daughters of this dominant female end up as top ranking just behind the female, the matriarch, if you like. Then you have another kin group, and then you have another kin group. Sorry? No, so this is a completely different group. Mother with daughters, mother with daughters. So this is the sort of fighting and structure that you have in mafia, no? So where different families are fighting for power, and I am protecting my kin because it's my kin, whatever that means in modern societies. So relatively common in primate species. Another very important element that affects how interactions occur in animal societies is whether how individuals behave towards group members versus other group members. In psychology, this is called the interpersonal intergroup discontinuity, that we behave differently to individuals who we recognize as group members versus other groups. And dehumanization, for example, is a typical consequence of the fact that we discard members of other groups. Even during Brexit, immigrants were called cockroaches because they were not humans, not us. We are, doesn't matter what we do. we are not important. And so again, this is a model that has been developed in females, but it applies potentially to many different types of societies, relevant for Lavoisier arguments, because it tries to explain how social relationships should emerge depending on the degree of competition and fighting, or the risk of fighting that there is within the group or between the group. So as I mentioned earlier, when you are not fighting, there is no reason for fighting with group members or with other groups. You can afford to be egalitarian. Potentially, of course, this is a model, so it's an oversimplification by definition of what is happening in real societies. When there is low level of competition within the group, but high level of competition between groups, you are better off being egalitarian, because you want to join forces against other groups. I'm not an anthropologist, but several anthropologists argue that warfare has been a very important force, evolutionary force in human evolution. So the potential risk of being killed when you are fighting with other groups, or if you leave the safety of your village, has shaped human evolution. Then you end up with the two last sociological conditions. In a situation in which there is a high level of competition within the group, so you are fighting a lot with members of your own group, but not so much with other groups, group members are going to fight for dominance. So you end up in this type of situation. You have a nepotistic society and very despotic society, because it pays off to gain power within your group. Finally, when you are fighting within the group, but also between groups, it's going to pay off to be nepotistic, so to preferentially bond with your kin, because you want to gain inclusive fitness benefits. But you also have to be tolerant, because you need the other group members in order to join forces and fight against other groups. Make sense? Yeah. Okay. Okay. I have 2 slides and then I'm done. So hopefully it's okay. So let's talk, actually more, 4. So let's move to the final part of the talk. And here I'm trying to explain what you can do in relation to what Lavoisier talks when he talks about the network that rulers need to build, but also how when he wonders about whether subordinates can fight against the ruler. So from an animal point of view, you can, of course, join forces to reverse the established dominance hierarchy that you have in your group. You have 3 different types of coalition formations or alliance systems that you can develop. What we call the all-down or conservative type of coalition. So if you take the dominant individual here and the subordinate here, and the direction of the arrows clearly indicates that 1 and 2 here are joining forces against 3. This is clearly a conservative coalition, because the 2 top-ranking individuals are saying, we are in power. Don't try, don't even try, okay? So they target usually the ones that are immediately after them, because these are the most challenging or dangerous individuals. Then you have breaching coalitions, where individuals from higher ranking and lower ranking join forces against an individual middle ranking. These are less common, especially because there is competition for gaining access to the top or to more dominant individuals. So subordinates very rarely have the opportunity to join forces with dominants. And finally, you have the revolutionary coalitions, where 2 individuals who are down in the hierarchy challenge a more dominant individuals. And this is really what may change the structure of society, as we will see in a moment, either in terms of changing at the top level, one ruler versus another one, or it can potentially transform society, the structure of the society, from a more despotic to a more egalitarian society. Again, these have been observed in animal behavior studies, but less frequently than these ones. These ones are the most common. Then I think you have this one, and more rarely you have these. Always because, remember, it's dangerous. You are challenging a dominant individual. That's a lot of danger involved in. So it doesn't happen very often. And here, hopefully, it's okay. So this model was developed on males, but again, you may apply it to virtually any, to both sexes and any condition. So here you have the frequency of paternity for the dominant individual. So what you see, each circle is an individual. What you see is that you have the dominant individual with more reproductive success than the second ranking, then the third ranking, and so on, until the subordinates virtually get almost nothing. And it's a model describing how different types of coalitions can affect the structure of the dominance hierarchy. So in an all-up conditions, here, you may have two different types of consequences. The first one, as I described earlier, is that there is simply a change at the top. Okay, this would be one king or one tyrant being replaced by another tyrant. It doesn't change anything for how the society is structured. It only changes that you have King Richard versus King Charles. Something like that. I just gave two names random. So have conditions in which these revolutionary coalitions actually change the distribution of resources. So you move from a steeper dominance hierarchy to a more egalitarian, so less unequal distribution of resources. And this, I guess, is the most relevant for Lavoisier argument. And then you have the breaching coalitions, again, two different types, when one individual can be moved up or down, depending on kinship, so whether one individual goes down the hierarchy or up the hierarchy. But these two are probably the most relevant for Lavoisier. Okay, the last argument that I think it has to be made about Lavoisier questioning about why the mass or the subordinates don't fight against the ruler is, in my view, linked to a collective action problem. Okay, a collective action problem is a situation where a group of individuals, a collection of individuals can acquire a resource through cooperation, through acting together. However, acquiring that resource is risky because once the resource is acquired, it is not distributed according to contribution, and it cannot be monopolized by the individuals who have access to the resource. Here is this is my daughter, by the way. So imagine that you have a large fish trying to eat all these small prey. If they act randomly, one separated from the other, chaos emerge, and the predator can pick the weakest individuals. This is what, for example, you observe when dolphins are trying to catch prey, okay? But if they join forces, it's a completely different story. We see this in baboons, for example, successfully mobbing predators like leopards. If you join forces, you can potentially fight against a ruler, a despotic ruler, but you can also scare off a predator. Now, if I put it this way, it's simple. You just need to join forces, that's easy. And then you can either remove a ruler from power or just scare a predator away. There's a problem, however. And the problem is that when you are joined forces, your contribution brings different potential costs. Okay? If I am the fish at the front here, then I may say, wait a second, I am right in front of the predator, I better move backwards. Okay. And if I start doing this, the collective action explodes immediately, because if I move back, the second in line says, no, no, not me, I'm going back. And the third one does the same. And you basically end up in a situation in which no collective action is possible. Okay? This is comparable to paying taxes. If we all pay taxes, we have ideally safety, clean streets, and so on, free education, ideally, and other things. But if you start not paying taxes, then you have a problem, because you have free riders who are trying to gain the benefits of taxpayers without incurring any costs. And this, in my view, is a potential danger for collective action problems in relation to WC, and about why individuals don't go against the ruler. Why should it be me? Why should I act first and say, I don't want this tyrant in place? It's dangerous for me. So I won't do that unless other individuals do that. Are you okay if I go on for a couple more? All right, so very briefly, to give you an idea that you can easily link behavioral economics to evolutionary biology, Elinor Ostrom, one of the few female Nobel Prizes in economics, won the Nobel Prize because she solved, so to speak, the collective action problem. And I am simplifying here because there are actually, I don't remember if it's 11 or 13 different rules, but these are the main one. On the analysis of resources like water holes in Central Africa, what she found is that in order for collective actions to be powerful, so in order for individuals to act together in a coordinated and efficient way, you need to have strong group identity. So individuals have to believe that they are part of a group. There may be a proportional distribution of benefits and costs. If I have higher cost or more danger than another individual, then no collective action can take place. There must be ways to punish free riders. This is probably the most common and ubiquitous rule in human societies. Every time we form rules, we set up norms for punishing free riders. And finally, Francesco talked about it briefly, there must be reconciliation, conflict management strategies that handle and manage potential conflicts between individuals. Okay, final two slides. So again, I am oversimplifying here, so it's not perfectly, it's a very simplified version of what happened, but this is one of the key differences between humans and other societies, that we have moved progressively into greater social complexity, more social layers, which are a key indicator or driver of social complexity, division of labor, so unequal distribution of resources or of tasks, greater social inequality. All these things increase collective action problems. So the more complexity you have, the larger the size of the group, the more difficult it is to handle large network of individuals. You can do that now with social media. You can arrange a flash mob in a day if you have followers, but not 100 years ago or even 50 years ago. So much more difficult to say, okay, let's act together to outpower the ruler. And finally, just as an indicator, again, I took these numbers from them. So hopefully the numbers fit with your historian expertise. But just to give you an idea of how inequality has increased over time. We have good records of what was happening in ancient Rome, and in particular in the Battle of Cannae, a large proportion of the Roman army deceased, but around 33% of commanders died. So this is a higher proportion than the average number of soldiers dying, meaning that Rome, however unequal the society was, the more gains you get from fighting, the more risk you face, which is what should do in cost-benefit analysis point of view. USA, data from 2000, but also from the Vietnam War, not really. Much more unequal distribution of resources. And if we take the last proper, let's say, war that US fought, you can see that the proportion of African-American soldiers who died in battles is substantially higher than their representation in the society, meaning that the weakest part of the societies were facing significantly higher costs than the leaders. Greater inequality, more difficult for collective action problems, more difficult to coordinate activities, more incapacity or less freedom to overpower the ruler. I'm sorry that I ran too late, but thank you very much for your